Hey Janie, this is Dr. Scott. I have some feedback for you on your second essay. Um, Instead of special topics this week, instead of meeting as a class, we're going to meet individually. So we'll talk about that the next day or two, like setting up times to do that. But what I'd like you to do is to kind of listen to the feedback that I'm providing here, come up with your questions, and come up with your, if there's anything I need to clarify, if you're not sure how to go about revising something that I'm mentioning here, prepare that kind of stuff for our meeting, and we'll meet for like 10 or 15 minutes like we did with the first essay. So the screencast, I'm going to kind of walk you through some of the different things that I was noticing, and then I'll talk about how you did as far as the grading for this assignment. You'll need to revise this a bit more. I just want to say that I'm really proud of your progress here. I think you have a really solid start. The thesis statement, that's one of the main criteria for this assignment. Like, I thought you did a solid job here with your thesis statement. Oops, that's not your thesis. This is down here, though. Like, through the use of expressions of the characters and the use of color, they're getting this idea across about unity and how the town is kind of rebounded. I think that was really solid. There might be a few extra words here and there that we could talk about cutting, but overall I think it's a pretty solid job. This paragraph here, I'm not quite sure what this paragraph is helping you do. Is this paragraph kind of another attempt at an introduction, or I'm not quite sure what's going on here. I mean, it seems like both of these two paragraphs, they're trying to introduce the paper, and you might take elements of this and put it in the introduction. One of the important criteria for the assignment is setting up quotes, and this for me needs a little bit more connection here. I wasn't sure like how to read this quote after reading the first sentence here, so a little bit more transitioning is needed to take us from this sentence to the quote that we have coming up. Overall, that paragraph kind of, the beginning of this paragraph kind of confused me. Not the whole paragraph, but I wasn't sure what you were trying to do here. Some of it seems related to the expression thing, but a lot of it seemed more like introductory material. Alright, so the overall, like the big issue to address in your revision is the fact that these two paragraphs, the one about expression and the 1930 and the flood mural, and then the 1940s expressions, they're separate and they need to come together. And I don't mean that like you just need a super mega paragraph, but I think you kind of need to break down what kind of expressions are you seeing. There's parts of these paragraphs where you're not really talking about facial expressions or something like that. You're talking about how the town looks. And so I think like if you can kind of get down to like if it's just facial expressions, like compare facial expressions from the 1930s flood mural to the 1940s Chillicothe Street scene. And then if you want to do like another paragraph where you're talking about the buildings or how the town looks and comparing those two, like that's fine. But you definitely need to talk about both murals in the body paragraphs. Your paragraph about color works as well as it does because you do that, because I'm able to kind of see how the two relate to each other. Treating these as kind of separate, it's not really kind of helping you make the case to kind of support your thesis statement. So they need to kind of come together. So that's going to take a fair bit of work, and you'll want to think about like, okay, how do I kind of break down this this paragraph about expressions here? And I think the woman and her facial expression and how like it's a very somber kind of expression of all the people there in that mural. You compare that and you contrast that against the 1940s mural, you've got something kind of interesting there, which I think helps you get to that thesis statement. I think it supports that thesis statement. But what you're asking your reader to do is to kind of like, okay, remember what happened in the 1930s mural, and then keep remembering that, and we're talking about the 1940s mural, and then like you kind of bring the two together at the end of that paragraph, and they need to be brought together in each of the body paragraphs. So maybe a facial expression mural, maybe how the town is represented, like you do that in places in these body paragraphs here. So there's different ways to kind of breaking it down, and I think that that's kind of where you need to be at this point. But you definitely need to talk about both murals and the body paragraphs. I ask you a few questions, like when we think about black and white, we tend to think about like black and white photos. We tend to think like documentaries and things like that. Like it takes a more serious But that earlier comment about talking about the two murals in the same place, I think that that's really kind of important. And again, like, this paragraph works pretty well for the most part because you're doing that. I think there's a little bit more discussion about that kind of connects this to the overall thesis statement, that they're trying to get us to think a certain way about the town by the different ways that they use colors here. I think that that needs to be brought in towards the end of this paragraph. We need kind of reminders of like how these details are kind of related to that bigger thesis statement. So kind of go through the learning objectives for the assignment. Thesis statement, I think, was the number one objective. I think you're pretty solid there. And then we have, I think it's supporting details, like being able to use those to support your argument. And I think you do that in places. I think there's other places where you have a lot of details, but they're not always kind of tied back to that thesis statement. Organization is something that you'll need to think about. There should be reasons why there should be a reason why you have one paragraph and then the other. And that needs to be made a little bit clearer in your essay. So there needs to be a reason why you're going from talking about facial expressions to the way the town's represented. Maybe you think one, like the facial expressions, they're like the least effective way they get the idea across, or you think they're the most, and like you do maybe most effective, kind of least effective, something like that. There needs to be some kind of reason why you have paragraphs and the reason that you have them. And there's a little bit more work to be done with integrating sources, which is the fourth main criteria for this assignment. So I'll take you over to the rubric and kind of show you how you did on the assignment. Here it is. So here's how you did on the assignment. Thesis statement, I think it's solid. I think you got a pretty solid thesis statement there, so I think it's satisfactory. Making sure that your body paragraphs are supporting that thesis statement, that's where more work is needed. So I had you close to satisfactory there. Not quite there just yet. Organization and transitioning, that needs quite a bit of work, and so does source integration. I think you need a little bit more work there. Kind of setting up quotes, discussing them afterwards. I gave you one example where I thought that that was needed. And then close to satisfactory, MLA format is more or less okay. You need the hanging indents on the works cited page. I'll show you that. That's where the second line comes in a little bit. And I can show you how to set that up. The visual, I thought you did a pretty solid job there, and I think the semicolons were good. So you're more or less there. Again, that's small stuff. This is the big stuff, the stuff that we'll talk about on Thursday. All right, Janie, that's it for now. If you got any questions, let me know, but I'll see you on Thursday.